Hello everyone, ex-Wallkill Bethelite here. And Jehovah's Witnesses, and one of their favorite scriptures is Matthew chapter 24, verses 45 through 47. And in their New World's Translation, that's the Bible that the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses wrote for themselves. It says something to the effect of who really is the faithful and discreet slave who his master has appointed over his something like domestics to give them their proper food at the proper time. Now, people are going to ask, what stands out about that scripture that Jehovah's Witnesses like so much? What is it about that scripture? Well, in that scripture, Jehovah's Witnesses liken the food that is mentioned, that is the proper food at the proper time that's mentioned. They call food spiritual food. And when they talk about spiritual food, what they are referring to is their teaching material, what they read. Spiritual food is basically anything that they read from their religion. So if you were to translate that scripture into what Jehovah's Witnesses believe it means giving the proper teaching at the proper time. Now, every Jehovah's Witness, you can ask them, any Jehovah's Witness would agree that they believe that scripture is referring to giving the proper food at the proper time, meaning the proper spiritual teaching at the proper time, the right teaching at the right time. That is the polar opposite of Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm talking, they are the polar opposite. This is what we are talking about when we talk about cognitive ability, not just cognitive dissonance. Before we get to the cognitive dissonance, we got to get into the cognitive emptiness. That's Jehovah's Witnesses. Some of them might be dealing with cognitive dissonance, but all of them are dealing with cognitive emptiness. There ain't nothing in that shell of theirs. The butter done slipped off the biscuit long ago. These people have a scripture. Matthew 24, I think it was 45 through 47. And they repeat it so much that I haven't been a part of that cult in years. It is still hammered in my brain. They repeat it over and over and over and over again because they think that scripture is referring to watchtower leadership. Basically, their leadership in the cult. The problem is that they all are aware that that cult has done the complete polar opposite of that scripture. How in the world is your favorite scripture the one that describes the exact opposite of what you do? This is what I mean when people say, oh, there are all these intelligent Jehovah's Witnesses. They must not have read that scripture. They must not be attending any meetings, because the minute that they hear that scripture, proper food at the proper time, they know that they're talking about spiritual food, meaning teaching. And Jehovah's Witnesses, one of the number one characteristics of Jehovah's Witnesses is constantly having to change their teachings because they were giving the wrong teaching at the wrong time. So these people really think that Jesus Christ appointed their leadership, Tony Morris and, these goofballs in New York that keep getting everything wrong and keep having to change everything and teach that the end of the world is coming in 1975. Oh, then they got it wrong. Then they teach the end of the world is going to come before the group of people born in 1914 die off. Then they were wrong. Then they changed it to overlap the gender. When are we getting to the proper teaching at the proper time, the proper food at the proper time? It's not even like it's hard to figure this out. You got somebody who is reading something, and that's another problem with Jehovah's Witnesses, is a lot of them are darn near illiterate. They're darn near illiterate. You can go to a Kingdom Hall and watch them get up on stage and give all the different parts, and they're struggling through half of it. They struggle just repeating with what Watchtower tells them to repeat, let alone reading and comprehending. Jehovah's Witnesses have very, 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 very low reading comprehension, because that scripture should be the furthest scripture from any scripture that they want to highlight. That's the last thing that they do, is give proper food at the proper time. That's the absolute last thing that they do. They darn near half the freaking religion they hadn't had to change. That's why they call their old teaching old light, because it was wrong. It was never light. Like, this stuff is just so. When people compare cults, I compare Jehovah's Witnesses to the Heaven's Gate cult. Why? Because neither of their religious views, their teachings, make any sense to anybody with any common sense at all. At all. Giving Jehovah's Witnesses a Bible is like giving a 3-year-old a pair of sharp scissors and letting them run through the house with it. It is one of the most ridiculous things that you can do, is give somebody a Bible, give somebody a book who has that low of a level of reading comprehension. More than one person has commented on the fact that there are elders, Jehovah's Witness elders, who can't even pronounce half the scriptures they're telling the audience to turn to. You are talking about people who are wearing suits. They put on a necktie. They put on a suit jacket. They're walking around with a briefcase. But there is nothing inside that freaking shell of theirs. They are, I'm talking boneheads. Like the teachings that they have, most of them you can explain with poor reading comprehension. They have the teaching that only the 144,000 will go to heaven, and they all just so happen to only be Jehovah's Witnesses in our time. Well, if you read the scriptures in Revelation that talk about the 144,000, it talks about Jews, and it talks about virgins, and it clearly spells these people out, and it clearly does not describe any of these Jehovah Witnesses that are claiming to be exactly what is described in the Bible, when it's so clear, when it's so black and white, and these people still can't comprehend. It's because these people don't really even read the Bible. All they do is struggle to keep up with the different watchtowers that they print, the different videos that they have on their cult website. That keeps them busy. All they're doing is listening to whatever watchtower tells them. They don't even read the scripture. They could read the scripture in their own cult Bible. They don't even have to read it in the regular Bible. They can read it in the cult Bible that the Jehovah's Witnesses made, called the New World Translation. And in their own Bible, it don't make sense that they have this faithful and discreet slave that gives the proper teaching at the proper time, when they know full well that they've been given the wrong teaching at the wrong time. There ain't never a right time for a wrong teaching. So how these people read that scripture and think, well, we're going to call ourselves the faithful and discreet slave class, it's because Sam Hurd, Loesch, all these people up in New York, these are bonehead idiots, and they barely read the scripture themselves. They barely read the scripture. That's the only thing that makes sense, because if they would have read it and thought about it, they'd have been like, dude, we do the polar opposite of this. Let's not highlight it. If they would have read the scripture of Revelation in regards to the 144,000, they would have plainly, obviously seen all the scriptures describing Jews that are virgins and that are this, that, and the other, and from all the different tribes. And no, it ain't you. It's blatantly, completely, and totally obvious that you are dealing with people who only care about trying to keep up with watchtower reading material so that they can earn a title. They want to be called a pioneer, a ministerial servant, an elder. They don't care that this stuff is not in the Bible. They just want to keep up with all the watchtowers so that they can raise their hand and answer one of those third grade level questions that they asked them at the watchtower study. I'm talking about that. The faithful and discreet slave teaching is obviously wrong. The 144,000 teaching that Jehovah's Witnesses have, that they are it and only those people are going to heaven, that's wrong. All you got to do is read the scripture. And they got so many other things wrong. The scripture that they have about, or the teaching they have about Jesus being Michael the Archangel, they get that from poor reading comprehension. I'm telling you, I think that they're all the people who are up there at Bethel, translating all this stuff, coming up with all this stuff, come from the short bus. Like they were all mentally handicapped or something. There has to be an explanation, because the teaching that has to do with Jesus Christ being Michael the Archangel, they read the scripture talking about Jesus having the voice of the Archangel. That scripture, I believe, also describes, the sound of many waters. So I guess they think Jesus is made out of water. You know what I mean? Or if the scripture talks about thunder, they think Jesus is thunder. Like these people are idiots. They think Jesus is an archangel because the scripture says that there was the sound of the voice of the archangel, like the trumpet blast and the sound of the voice of the archangel. Boom! They think Jesus is an archangel and that Jesus likes to play the trumpet. These people are idiots. They are idiots in the shunning where they shun people who lead. It should be the other way around. We should be so embarrassed that we know people who are that darn slow. Like we should be so embarrassed that we know people who are that darn slow. All Jehovah's Witnesses do is try to nitpick and pick out things that they think are wrong with any other religion, and they got everything wrong. I'm talking about somebody who took a test and they flunked it. They got like a literal 0, and they're nitpicking the 1 or 2 things they think everybody else got wrong, or the 1 or 2 things they think everybody else did. Like these people are, this is something else. That scripture is literally like the flagship scripture of Jehovah's Witnesses. Comment down below. Let me know what you think. 937-789-4029. We'll discuss it. But yeah, I compare them with Heaven's Gate because it is boneheaded to believe that there are spaceships flying behind comets and you're going to get beamed up to one like the Heaven's Gate cult talk. And it is boneheaded to think that the very same people who constantly get their teachings wrong and have to change them all the time are the exact people described as giving the proper teaching at the proper time, when they are the polar and complete and total and extreme and complete opposite of that. 937-789-4029. X-Wall Kill Bethelite signing out.